Hi guys, welcome back to my channel and hello if you are new. I hope that all of you guys have had a really great week so far. I did not have such a great week. I was super psyched to go and see Unto Others on Thursday, and then out of nowhere I became ill. I've been testing multiple days for COVID and thankfully it's not COVID, but it is a strong reminder that the flu is very much still out there, and I've been basically completely out of whack for the last sort of 5 days really. This is probably the first day where I genuinely feel like I'm kind of okay. But with that in mind, Friday kind of had a really crazy release schedule, and I was going to try and do something a bit different, you know, to kind of make sure that I shine a light on some of the releases that maybe I wouldn't have been able to if I was doing just one standalone review. So here are my top 5 releases to check out from March 25th. The first is Nite and Voices of the Kronian Moon. So when I first got this promo, I basically kind of just left it to the side for a little while, and then whenever I get records sent to me, you know, I put them on my phone, and then I try and find, you know, places where like I wouldn't necessarily put that record on. Like, I don't know, I'll be on the tube or something and I'll start it midway through the album just to see what the vibe of this is like. And instantly I was hooked. And they are a relatively new band. They were only founded in 2018. So we've got 4 years, you know, of a band that, are, you know, they're really kind of just starting out. Heavy metal is very much the order of the day with Nite. I hadn't thought about how that was going to sound. And they kind of are pretty much present in the riffs and also the guitar lead lines, and particularly harmonies. They like ooze out of this record. But there's kind of like this black metal gruffness that comes from the voice, which I really liked. So, you know, in terms of sound, they kind of sound like a composite of Midnight, Bewitcher, and Tribulation. There's some really interesting, almost kind of prog-led solos on this record as well, which I was quite surprised with. So it's not all just kind of like trad worship. But most importantly, it's got that like really fist-pumping kind of anthemic feel. You can see that on Heliopolis, which has, you know, almost like the Motley Crue kind of like dum 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 dum, whilst the guitar line, you know, is getting bigger and bigger. And there's also, I think, a layer of 70s prog rock here, and whilst it may not necessarily be immediately apparent, with more kind of listens, you just get the vibe that, you know, there's probably one of the guys in this band that like Yes or King Crimson, you know, or Genesis maybe, you know, that kind of like classic prog rock. Next up is a band that I'd never heard of, which was Falls of Rauros and their album Keys to a Vanishing Future. So the theme of this album is nice and bleak. It's basically the keys to the vanishing future are essentially that whoever we are, you know, for this next generation, we're handing down we're handing down something to a generation that we don't know whether or not is going to be, you know, like a good future or a bright future. And it's both the, you know, the successes and also the failures of the previous generation are then handed down to this new generation without them being asked for it, which I thought was quite an interesting topic, particularly at the moment, you know, where, I mean, everything seems to be really not so great. But Falls of Rauros are a band that has seemingly been around for quite some time. They formed in 2005, which I didn't know. This is their 6th album as well. And it's really captivated me. It's another fantastic release from Gilead Media, who are fast becoming one of my favourite record labels. And in terms of the sound, this is very much a progressive sounding record. You know, I think at times it reminded me very much of Agalloch. But then there were moments of that sort of melodicism that you would see in like Insomnium, for example, and then even kind of post-rock feels that brought to mind a bit of Isis, you know, a bit of like Pelican, that kind of thing. Desert of Heart solo is absolutely fantastic, and then there are moments on Known World Narrows which almost made me think of, you know, Chet Atkins kind of like country, and then even Steven Wilson kind of popped his head in at some point. So there's so much different variety kind of going on just the one album. I really recommend that album to you guys because I'd never heard of this band. I'm really, really glad that I've, you know, heard of them now, and I'll definitely be looking out for whatever it is they do next. So if you're not familiar with the band, they have been the lifeblood of what I would say posse hardcore. I don't know, I'm not really going to get into semantics about it, but hardcore in general, I think they're one of the most underrated, most brilliant bands out there. And one of the reasons that I think they were so good was because of their singer, who was a Hungarian singer called Zoli Teglas. And I think this is why, because of the Hungarian intonation of when they speak, different sort of ways of phrasing something will give it different meanings, and that's why I think he was so great at manipulating his voice, and he had such a hold on vocal patterns that he was literally like, he's like Freddie Mercury of hardcore, basically. So since then, Zoli has left Ignite, and we now have I think, really, really great replacement under the name of Eli Santana. So Eli Santana is in a band called Holy Grail. The fact that they got someone to almost remind me of Zoli's, you know, really unique sound is honestly testament to how great Eli is as a singer. And I think it's important that you understand that it's never going to be like Zoli, like, you know, that's it. He's just one in a million. But Eli also has his real stamp on things, which I think is really, really interesting. And he also brings a bit more of a kind of shreddy aesthetic to some of the tracks. And all of the hallmarks that make an Ignite record are here, particularly where it comes to dynamics. I think, you know, that they're still playing with dynamics and making those transitions in the songs even kind of like smoother than you would think. But there was just something that was a little bit lacking. That's not to say don't listen to it, because I think, you know, it's definitely worthy. Otherwise I wouldn't have included it on this list. But it was just something slightly different. And I think it may be, you know, just because it might require a bit more time. But overall, I thought this was a really solid Ignite release. There are some kind of more metalcore moments, and it gets heavier in places, like Call Off the Dogs, for example. But, you know, they're entering a new era. It's not going to be the same band, so I don't think we should be surprised if they do sound a little bit different, and I think maybe embrace that sense of difference. So if you're a fan of Ignite, definitely check this one out. Let me know what you think in the comments. If you like it, if you're not a fan, I'd love to know. Now, formed in 2015 after the split of Immortal, Abbath is a legend unto his own. He is literally the single-handed creator of memes in black metal pretty much everywhere, and this is his third album under the name of Dread Reaver, which I kept on calling Soul Reaver, but I blame Raziel for that. If you're old like me and you know what Soul Reaver is, you'll totally get that joke. If not, just carry on. Actually, no, go and play Soul Reaver, because it's one of the best games I've ever played. Anyway, so Abbath's third album has been getting a lot of flack, I've noticed. I think that the only thing I can say that is really, really wrong with this record is the production is not very good. It sounds quite fuzzy and just kind of like, I don't know, if you're sort of, it's probably a good thing in black metal, but like caught in a blizzard, it just doesn't necessarily sound clear enough. But sometimes that works in its favor, like with this fantastic cover of Trapped Under Ice, which just sounds like it's just battering down, you know, like the hatches. I really, really like it in that respect. But when you're kind of looking for clarity and things like that, it's maybe a bit to the album's detriment. But with all that in mind, I think songwriting, it's actually pretty good. You know, there's definitely more of a proto-Venom, you know, like early black metal, kind of heavy metal vibe on this, especially, you know, with like dive bomb solos and all that sort of stuff. You can really see the young sort of influence here, which I quite like. I think it's interesting to see where these bands come from. And he still sounds like a didgeridoo on Scarred Core. But yeah, I mean, you know, there's not really a huge amount to say. It's another Abbath album, you know, it sounds like Abbath. It's not quite got the magic that the first solo album had. But there's definitely moments on here where I kind of was like, ooh, that's a chunky riff. But yeah, the only sort of thing that really does kind of let it down is the production. But if you're a fan of black metal, I would definitely say at least give it a go. And so we come to the final band in this video, which is Absent in Body and their album Plague God, which sounds literally as horrendous as the title suggests. So this is a band which are formed of members of Neurosis, Sepultura and Amun-Ra. Those are some three seriously heavyweight bands. Bands that have been put together have really made something that's very different. You know, it doesn't necessarily sound like Amun-Ra, apart from Colin Van Eekhout's signature, which, you know, like, no one sounds like that at all, but it doesn't necessarily kind of overshadow Plague God, I don't think. The record itself is quite industrial sounding in places. It's very much post-metal. It's quite an arduous listen, I would say. It's not exactly like, you know, butterflies and rainbows. It's pretty much everything that you would dread in sonic form, and reminds me, you know, kind of like the epicenter of what Through Silver in Blood, you know, kind of was implying. And the guitars can be crushing, but then kind of move into a very solemn place. And, you know, Colin's sort of almost signature spoken word elements are definitely on here as well. But personally, I think it's a really, really interesting album. And, you know, particularly if you're a fan of post-metal, you definitely don't want to miss out on this for sure. So those are my top 5 picks for the releases of March 25th. Let me know if I've missed any. I'm sure I have, because there's 1,000 releases every week. I have got Meshuggah's Immutable review going live this week as well, and that is seriously good. So I'll be putting that up very, very soon. And then after that, I've got an Undeath interview, which will be going up very shortly as well, which is good fun. But other than that, let me know what you think of the video and any albums that I might have missed underneath me in the comments. And I will see you very, very soon for another roundup, another review, all sorts of stuff.